Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Lowell Lodestars Drilling Deeper webinar. This month, we've got a great friend of mine and of the fund, Michael Hudson. A real coup to get Mike on the line to dish the dirt on how he's done it with one of his latest ventures, Southern Cross Gold. Good morning, Mike, or good day, Mike, I should say.
G'day, John. Lovely to be here. What an honour amongst the esteemed people you've had on this segment already. So very happy to be here, mate.
Oh, no, thank you very much. We're really looking forward to the discussion today. We'll get straight into the first section. We're going to do a little bit of market commentary first, and we're very lucky to have Mike Hudson here to talk about the differences in the Aussie market and the Canadian market, focused on junior resources, and the pluses and minuses, and in particular the differences in valuation between those. And obviously Mike's company, Southern Cross Gold, is listed on both ASX and now the TSX. So it'll be great to get his insights on that. Then we'll go into some background from Mike on his illustrious and highly varied career in exploration across the globe, and get some insights into the learnings that he's had over his career into how to make big mineral discoveries. After that, we'll have hopefully be able to get to all the Q&A, and then we'll have a wrap up. So what we're going to talk about today, just for a few minutes, is the differences between the ASX resources, junior resources market, and the TSX in particular. The TSX Venture Exchange is the main one for junior explorers in North America. And really what we've seen over a number of years has been an underperformance of the TSX Venture Exchange versus the ASX resources sector. And that has driven quite a bit of interest from Canadian listed companies to come and look at a dual listing or just a swap from the TSXV to the ASX, which is not an insignificant thing to do, obviously. And that is largely driven by valuations. I've got my own theories as to why the ASX has performed better in general than the TSXV. I think one of them may be related to the different markets, in terms of there are a lot more alternative investment opportunities in North America. So while the capital pool is, of course, much bigger in North America than in Australia, there's a lot more to choose from. And in particular, things like AI, the opportunities to invest in that in North America are much greater than, say, here in Australia. But there are quite a few other differences as well on the pluses and minuses. Generally, the Canadians are much more careful with issuing stock. It's not uncommon for an Aussie company to have a billion or more shares outstanding, whereas you say that to a Canadian, they're just absolutely horrified. I think North American execs, and I'd be interested to hear your view on this, Mike, generally get paid less, but they may have more than one hat. So yeah, look, interesting differences. And what we've seen. Well, here's a slide which does show, this is just 2025. This is the TSX Venture Exchange Metals and Mining Index. And we have seen a recovery in that index from a very low base, but it's up over 40% in the first 6 months of this year. So, from a really decimated position, we have seen some recovery. But there have been quite a few companies that have come from the TSXV or TSX to the ASX. I've listed a few there. There's quite a few copper companies amongst them. I think part of the reason for that is that the ASX copper space has been to some extent hollowed out by it hasn't been a big number of companies in advanced copper plays on the ASX for quite some time, but there's been a number of takeovers of late, such as Xanadu Mining, New World Resources, etc. So we have seen a few copper companies migrate, I should say dual list from the TSX to the ASX. But of course, there's been a few that have gone the other way: Mithril, Omega, and Mike, Southern Cross Gold just in the last week or two has migrated and been promoted to the TSX from the TSXV. So Mike, over to you. Any thoughts on the different markets and how you perceive them?
Yeah, how long have we got, John? I should say, despite this accent, I've spent 25 years in the Canadian and North American markets, and Southern Cross, which is there, is my first Australian ASX deal. So I've been on an aeroplane from Melbourne across the Pacific for far too long. There's pros and cons for both. I mean, I remember back in the noughties, everyone was going across to Canada for all the reasons, a lot of the reasons that you spoke to, much bigger pools of capital, much bigger risk taking. We're very, very conservative here, and our capital's very conservative. So the way that we build projects here is to build them, put resources, try and get into mining quicker. Whereas in a general sense, North Americans are going, how big can this be? How big can we make this? And so as a consequence, Canadians build bigger projects from a capex point of view, so they'll put in shafts, whereas Aussies will put down declines on smaller resources as a general rule. And as a consequence, the Canadian market is better pre-development, and the Aussie market is better for miners, I think, overall. The Aussie market, the biggest difference for me is the transparency. So we can see who buys and sells our shares from just the regulatory point of view. And if somebody's selling, we can say, hey, you've got some shares, more shares. Would you like us to find a buyer for those? So we can actually work with shareholders to keep shares off the market. So you don't find those opportunities where people are saying, I'm not selling and your share price is going down. So you can manage your register much better. And likewise, if somebody's buying, you call them up and welcome them. So it's a much better relationship with shareholders, whereas Canada, through the North American rules, you can't have any transparency. So Canada's full of smiling assassins. We're not selling, and it leads to, and as a consequence, that leads to what you talked to, which is the structure of companies. Actually, it doesn't matter if you've got 100 shares out or a billion, as long as you understand the register, which is the key point around register management, at least, then Canadians can only roll a stock back and know who's in that rollback stock, and then progressively you lose control of understanding your register. That being said, it's all around, and we'll talk about this, per share metrics. Per share metrics is everything in this game, and I've learned that as I've gone through and made the mistake of not thinking about that for a lot of my career. So it does matter. Dilution will get you in the end, either way, transparency. And yeah, there's many other things that get that. Well, I suppose one other is that Canadians lost their way, with smoking the weed literally on their market, or hallucinogens or crypto, whereas we do our knitting. So that's where the change has come. The TSX has 5 times the amount of capital, though, because of that doorstep of North America. So it's I've been in a room over the last months with private capital that is a room of less than 100 people. It was $1 trillion in that room. Now that doesn't happen in Australia, right? That pool of capital is just not there. So it's and I remember Robert Friedland once saying 1% of the world's capital is directed towards mining. I'm going after the other 99%. So it just gives you more opportunities, I suppose, in a bigger pool. So you can't ignore it. So I think if you can get both listings, and it's very hard to get both listings right in terms of management and being known. Some of those companies have come across here on the back of Capstone, and it's very hard for them to get liquidity without teams here, or they're being known. We've known each other for a long time, so I'm going to manage your capital as well as possible. Whereas if I didn't know you, I've got to demonstrate myself over time before you're going to take a punt on me and the company that I'm running. So it's not simple to do it both ways. You've got to have a very good partner, basically, as in the person you married.
Yeah, indeed. And look, interesting. You mentioned flying, across the Pacific probably more times than you can remember. But that was one of the things, a silver lining to COVID, if I guess, brought you back home, and to a project very close to home for you, a real benefit. And hopefully you're not having to spend quite as much time on a plane anymore. But I think we'll get into that. I'll just finish this set of slides, and then we'll jump into talking a bit more about Southern Cross and Mike's career. But before I forget, the Lowell Resources Fund is having a mid-year investor briefing. Mike will be presenting at that investor briefing with 3 other companies, and that's at 5 p.m. for people in Melbourne. That's 5 p.m. on the 29th of July. So please go to the LRFM website if you'd like to register for that. There'll be drinks and canapes complimentary, but numbers are limited, so please get onto that if you haven't. So look, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pass over to Mike Hudson to hopefully pass on to us, and I'm sure he will, some absolute pearls of wisdom about his career and what he's learnt over the last 30 odd years.
So you've asked me to do something that I don't generally do, and it's a little odd talking about yourself, and even getting slides of yourself together. It's a bit retrospective, and I want to approach this with humility, absolutely. And going through it, actually, it did create a lot of humility in me, because I just realised how many good people around me have taught me through the process. So I think I've got 10 or 12 minutes or something. So let's see how we do before we get onto the Southern Cross point of view. But that's what I like to call myself, an explorationist number one. I love finding things, and it's how I started life with metal detectors and panning as a young kid, and it's come through. I've learned how to be an entrepreneur, and I'm still learning how to be a better entrepreneur, and have had some very good teachings from those around Southern Cross. So even in my 50s, I'm still learning, and no doubt you get old, so you can start taking different roles in companies, and I do genuinely like people, so it's a good skill to have. I have focused through copper and gold a lot, but by the first 10 years and the most of the slides, because I got caught on finding old photos, it will talk about a lead zinc history in Pasminco, and I got into critical metals way too early, was the truth. And you'll see that too. So I've got a very strong view on critical metals and where we can play a role and where we won't, and where we're dreaming, basically. So happy to go into that. But life started. Here we are. I was born in Kilmore, and the key point talking about Kilmore is that this is where Southern Cross is next to. I'm 5th generation from Kilmore, and so where it all started, hopefully not where it ends, but at least where it's come back to now, with the one of the best discoveries of my career within 5 kilometres of where I grew up. So I'm pretty slow at working things out, you could say.
And for those who don't know, Kilmore's just what, an hour north of Melbourne. Yep.
60
here in Victoria.
60 kilometres, exactly. Yeah, so I had a normal country upbringing, and prospecting, there it is. Lots of sport, motorbikes, shooting, and all those kind of things, and lots of mates, and trying to avoid all the snakes and everything that were in our backyard. Then I went down to high school on Phillip Island, which was a big change, and then I went to Melbourne, and I was good at science, and I thought I'd be something in science, and this is pretty much why geology stuck and sticks for many of us, is that it's a bloody good undergraduate degree. You have lots of fun, you go on lots of camps, you learn lots of things. There's lots of people like you who love being outdoors, using their mind and using that science to second guess nature. So there was lots of fun. So that's a bunch of mates who are still very much in touch with, having a bit of fun in 3rd year at Silverton. This is, of course, the Kilmore shot, and that's it. When I graduated, I thought I'd dress up, or I was told to dress up like a geologist. So I thought that's what we all look like at the time. And I got thrown into Broken Hill, and I realised I knew nothing. A degree at Melbourne Uni is a very good theoretical degree, perhaps, but not a degree that teaches you much about economic geology and people. So I spent 3 years underground. I couldn't find a photo of me underground for this, but that was a great learning. It gave me the economic parameters around the mining business, and what can work and what you can stope and what you can't stope. And so it's always in the back of your head, and I encourage anyone who's a young geologist to get in early, because exploration's, for me at least, much more fun than working underground in a mine. But I loved that time, and I learned that geologists were the bottom of the pile, basically, and had even people like Ian Smith as a shift boss. So you can imagine the rigor of a bright-eyed Melbourne uni graduate going underground. Then I got spat out, and and went exploring for a few years, and I was exploring around the pinnacles, and we doubled the resource there, and you can see some of the names. So there's going to be reoccurring names, and the humbleness of what putting this slide pack together was what people have effects they've had in my career. So Pasminco was a great training ground, and we'll talk through that because I had 10 years getting that training as a geologist. But people like Tom Eady, who's the chairman of Southern Cross today, ran exploration for Pasminco and gave me my first job. Lots of great peers. Dave Laurie is one of the world's expert geochemists now, and he and I grew up together. So if I ever really need to know anything geochemically, it's only a phone call away. Nick Cook has played a huge role through my life, amongst others. Terry and Angela work for us at Southern Cross too, amongst many others. It's sort of like putting a party invitation together. You're paranoid that you're going to miss people out. So I'm not going to name heaps of people, but I just wanted to emphasize that people keep coming back into my life, and I've been very thankful for that. After 5 years in Broken Hill, I had a wanderlust to travel. And then I got sent for a couple of years to Pakistan, and a bit of a foray through India. I had a lot of fun living in the tribal areas, and we had an old UN project that was just a barite pit. It had a couple of holes into it, and we actually built a mine there pretty much from first principles. We didn't build the mine, we drilled it out, but an Australian company in the tribal areas of Pakistan at one of Pakistan's more quiet times was about as good as it got. A Chinese company took this and eventually mined it, and I did find a mine photo here, that Duda, which was the name of the lead zinc project. So again, around economic geology. Then I begged Tom, running exploration, to send me overseas again, and I had a year wandering around the Andes. There we are at a mine I've thought about a lot. It's Pachapaki. It's above a glacier. It's not even next to a glacier. It's above a glacier. And it reminded me of somebody who taught me how to operate in the Andes, and that's a guy called Dave Gardner. He ended up passing away on Mount Cook on an avalanche. So he was a real mountaineer, and lived and died like that, and a lovely bloke, and it just got me reminding of people I've worked with too. And then, because I make a habit of going back to places, I went back to where I made the original discovery in '95. We put a discovery hole into a thing called Portia, which was a gold project, and it's ended up being a mine also. I was certainly on that discovery hole, and then many other people have worked around that, and there's Nick again, and some others who were critical around that project. But I came back and with 6 to 8 rigs drilled out what I made the original discovery earlier on. So I had a year back in Broken Hill, which was which is a very strong part of who I am. I love the hill, and the training that came through there, which was 120 years of some of the best people in mining and finance, and the Collins House group that funded a lot of Australia and other mines beyond, came out of Broken Hill. So I love the history and what Broken Hill represents to Australia. And the Australian mining industry, and of course BHP was left in 35, but they still bear the name. And then I went back to live in Peru and learned to speak Spanish and had lots of fun. Here I am. My wife made a derogatory comment about what she thought I'd been doing there, but just had a very big day, been thrown out of a helicopter and was exhausted, with some great people who I'm still in contact with. Here's Rolando, who's became a very senior geologist through Peru. Getting bogged was a big part of it. I was working in the jungles of Peru then for part of it. Also up at the top of the Andes, with skunks there, if you could see that circle there. So I had that experience that went on to lead to what has become Hannan and the new porphyry copper alkaline gold epithermal belt that we found in the back arc of Peru. I was getting trained in working in those environments early on. So Pasminco was a great schooling. It wasn't WMC in terms of the recognition, but it certainly was like that very much. The best people that I could learn from, both in the mine and then 6 or 7 years. You had Paul Roberts on. Paul was one of my bosses during that whole period, and was basically the technical lead through the company. So I had a lot to do with Paul too. So and he came across to Peru as I was just leaving. So great people doing great things have gone on to do even better things. You know, we got Tom, we talked about Nick Cook, Dave Laurie, and others. So a great training for a young geo. And here's some of my geo tourism. So, you know, wandering through India, that photo alone taught me how to respect core. I treat every core box like a Van Gogh painting or something like that now, and that wasn't the best example of a core yard there. And in the tribal areas in Quetta, I couldn't get there now. None of us probably could that safely, through to some of the other key events. I went to Sweden early. That was another thing in '96. Barry Murphy and I went across to Sweden. So there's another name, a Pasminco person who's come up in your webinars, and so that's what I knew later in 2001 or two to go back to Sweden, because I'd had a little foray in there and saw that nobody had been exploring there really since the government pre their entry into the EU. And then I had one little stint with a junior who you know of, Lake Resources, which is now a lithium company, but it was looking for Broken Hill type deposits. I was an expert in those and got sent up by Jim Clavarino and Rod Dorney, who were two guys I'd met in Pakistan through AusAid. They were running AusAid projects, so they sent me and here's another person that you may know of, Jason Ward. We looked like we were operating in fairly harsh conditions in the snow there, and that's where I got the taste for the junior business, and then I thought I can do this, and that's that's what we did. And so that was back in 24 or 5 years ago now. We bought Pasminco, went into receivership, and a long association started with Mark Saxon, who we were hip to hip for the first 12 or 13 years. He managed to buy that data for South America from Pasminco receivers. Then we bought lots of projects, and staked lots of projects, including projects here in Victoria. And we failed and sold the projects to Pan Aegis, which became Ngambia Resources, which we went and bought back a few years ago, which became Southern Cross. So, I'm not that clever. I do something and it seems to work and comes back. There was a lot of things we were trying. I say it was a time we had lots of balls in the air. Most of them didn't come back down. Some of them did. And then we listed Mawson, which is actually the same company. The first company, I've done about 7 now, in its structure is now Southern Cross. And here's a little fella that's with me. He's now 21, and he was marketing through Vancouver here. And there's Mawson in its first early days as a gold company. When we started, Mawson was in 2004. We'd come out of a very bad time post Bre-X, and actually Mark and I had learnt about the bad times in industry as we're starting to become entrepreneurs. So it was a fortuitous time, and then also the timing was incredible, because I was in my early 30s when we were at the boom of all booms, with China's expansion and growing and thirst for metals, literally. And then another key point at that time when we founded Mawson was that I met David Henstridge, Nick DeMeyer, and Mariana Bermudez, who still are very much close to us. David's a director of Southern Cross. Really was the mentor who brought me into the junior world. Nick has been the most solid business partner for 25 years, and really had my back and around all the governance and compliance, and allowed me to wander the world and start these companies. And Mariana is our company secretary and has been since that first instance in 2004. So an amazing group of people who've looked after my best interests and our best interests, but I couldn't have done it without them. And those 7 companies that I spoke of before, they've all been done with David, Mariana, Mark, and Nick. So key people right through this story. Then we listed a few other companies. We found one of the world's third largest heavy rare earth deposits. We refurbished a graphite mine that was producing 1/6 of Europe's graphite, amongst other things, doing lots of exploration through uranium. So I got an association with the French government and Areva and people there who've taught me a lot too, just the uranium experts of France. So it was a great learning, but also now doing it in a different forum through the junior markets, but all Canadian, North American, no Australian companies. So I've got a few. I haven't even pulled them out, but the first stage was when we just started listing. The second stage was when we were starting to get traction and doing a few more companies. And I kept focus, and Mark went on and did other things, but we were directors of both. And then, the downturn came, but I found great support from a private equity group that we didn't get it all right, but that in terms of just the funding model, I should say. But Sentient were a great support and went on to find a 1 million ounce deposit in Finland, amongst other things. Georgina Carnegie, who's one of the board directors, came to me from Sentient. Nick Mead, who is our corp dev, was IR for Sentient. So again, people that I got on with, you gravitate to and learn from. And then we listed another company, Hannon, who went to Ireland. That's a picture of proudly our office in Quinn, next to the pub. Not a bad place to be, but that's also the birthplace of Paddy Hannon. So that's how Hannon got its name. We were in, and I got to know some of his relatives, and Ireland's such a beautiful place to do business. It really is, and not what you think in terms of perhaps population, etc. Such a nice, lovely group of people. So that was the next stage of my career, and solidifying, surviving during downturns, key part of it all. And then you said put a few graphs in, Mike. Everyone loves a graph. So that I did. So here's Hannon in the blue and Mawson in the red. And it's been a good few years, no doubt, since the start, over the last 18 months, where we've, that this is all relative. Southern Cross has been one of the best performing ASX companies since we listed in 22, but it's been dramatic in terms of the scale of that graph over the last 18 months. But Hannon's had a pretty good run and is really at its very early stages. I call it the COVID special that you talked about. I wasn't traveling, so I thought better do something here. And Nick was working with me and others, and we said, let's list these projects in Australia, the ones we bought back from 20 years ago, more or less. And that it's gone down in history, but that's the first hole. I cut it, and it's the only. I said I'm the second best core cutter in the company. That's the family discovery with the first hole. So that's how Southern Cross started, and the marketing that has been telling the story and being able to do it in my backyard has been very enjoyable. And then I've had this sort of weekend job wandering the back arc of Peru, and with some very good people there. You saw Lars, and now Zach's gone across there, and Catty Vargas, who's our general manager, was our office manager in the 90s in Peru. So again, trusted people and people who are very good at their jobs. And now this is Southern Cross. It's a great project, a grade and scale, I say. So what is Southern Cross? It's Sunday Creek, of course, 60 kilometres north of Melbourne. It's a rare asset, a very high grade. We've got an 8.5 to 10.6 grade range out of the exploration target, somewhere between 2.2 and 3.2 million ounces. We're only about a tenth of the way through the discovery. So there's a lot more exploration upside to come. It's a very rare asset. And literally, I was schooled 5 kilometres overlooking the project. We've just bought back into a building that my great-great-great-grandfather built in 1856, and that's going to become our office. So a real legacy, not only for me and my family, but something very important for the town that I grew up in. This is going to be a significant project for a long time, ideally. Huge implications for the community work and the Shire, and to bring people back to the municipality that it's become a very commuting municipality. So we've got a lot of work to do, but an amazing project and amazing legacy to return to Australia. I've learned a lot about per share metrics, which we can talk to, those partnerships that have been part of the last 30 years. And I've even done better things like employ 50% women, which is a wonderful thing. It just creates a normal company, like normal society, as opposed to a lot of the blokiness that I've seen through my career. So as I've tried to demonstrate with every discovery, it's always a team, and Southern Cross is no different. We've got something like 40 people on staff and another 30 contractors at the moment. So 70 people associated with the project pretty much directly. There's been a key few people. There's many more that are very current and real. So I thank everybody. But Lisa Gibbons was literally after I cut that first hole that you saw just before. Lisa was living on the tenement. She's a well-trained Newmont geologist, and I met her, and she's been a great partner in this business, looking after many of the aspects of the business as it's grown and changed. And then another person is Kenny Bush, who's an expert in these Victorian systems, has taught me a lot around how these systems work. And thank you to Agnico too, where Kenny came out of from Fosterville, for allowing those concepts to be shared. Tom Fromhold was very important in the early days. He came out of Mandalay. So really key people. And then another person who I really love working with is Justin Muchaka, a company secretary who has really trained me in the Australian market and how it works, and not only just the governance and regulations, but who's who in the zoo. So a great team that we started with. We're all together, and it's grown very much since then. I've got some learnings we can talk about, but that's really sort of how it's progressed, John. And 30 years goes pretty quickly, and it's been a hell of a lot of fun. Probably at 56, didn't want to admit that, did I? 56. I'm very happy to be back in my backyard where it all started from that first slide.
Mike, that's a fabulous run through. Thank you very much. Look, I think you might have the key slide coming up with some of the learnings made over that career. So perhaps we can go straight to that and get you to run through some of those.
Yeah, so I thought about it. I mean, really, the key ones that I talk to, and everybody knows, have fun, make money, be good. I'll keep it clean, and I'll keep it a bit colloquial, the no dickhead rule. So I've incorporated those in a few others, but they can mean many things, I suppose. So I mentioned it before, and it's a shout out to my wife, who's been an amazing support to allow me to do all this. Like, who'd marry a geologist, really, in terms of, we've traveled the world and with young kids, etc., and dragging them around the world. So I'm very thankful, number one, for that, and you can't do it without that partnership, without a doubt. Here's to have fun and have a passion for discovery, and everyone in the company needs to do that. Even from the accountants, bookkeepers, etc. They need to know that the key metric success is finding gold or whatever you're looking for, and that's the business of R&D. And you want to be flexible and have small teams and keep the bureaucracy down as much as you can in this modern day and age. No, be good. That just means maintain professional excellence. You try and do the right thing all the time. I don't get it always right. And surround yourself with the best people. That's what that one really means. There was many years where it's sometimes better to do nothing, and cull workforces, and that goes to the cost of the cost of capital or per share metrics. Which is, you've got to develop some resilience, no doubt, through the bad times. We're in a very cyclical business, and the best relationships, without a doubt, are made during the hard times, and that's when you get to know the color of everybody's eyes. Keep learning. That's one thing I've definitely learned with Darren Morecambe and Pierre Lassonde and Kirill Sokolov and the group who are behind Southern Cross. They've taught me a hell of a lot. So they're great partners in this business and really bastions of the industry. And I have to pinch myself quite often that we have such important people behind this company. Pierre founded Franco-Nevada, the world's largest royalty company. He ran Newmont, the world's largest gold company. He's had many billion-dollar plus companies and discoveries, and written books on investment in the gold business. The Lassonde curve, of course, that we all talk to is named after him because he defined it. Darren is an amazing partner in the business also. He's taught me a hell of a lot, and you've heard me talk about per share metrics, etc. It's easy to make a larger market cap company, but very hard to make the share price go up with that in a discovery, and Darren has been that and much more. And Kirill is an amazing person who has a very global thematic view of the world, amazingly holistic, spiritual, and intellectual. And I'm very fortunate to be around Kirill and the group of people that are around him also. So amazing people and supporters behind Southern Cross. this is not a short-term business. You've got to be very nimble, but you plan for the long term. And Hannon has been a long-term plan. Back in 18 or 19, when zinc in Ireland as a commodity was not working, we were thinking about where we could go and make the biggest discoveries in the world and take a big swing at that stage of our lives. So, that's now playing out now, just really starting with drill rigs, just starting, etc. So, but it's a long-term plan. You don't have a business that comes together in a few months. See lots of rocks without a doubt, and you become an expert on things as a geologist. Get the best people around you. You can believe it, drink your own Kool-Aid in a junior company because you don't have a big pool of people. And that's where coming out of a big pool of people in a company like Pasminco was great, because it gave me the best people to learn from. So in a junior, you can't do that. So go and find the world's experts and bring them into the team. It enriches you, but enriches the team around you, and makes you feel like a bigger organization, or makes you into a bigger organization. And then make money, don't chase it. It's a great metric, but it should never be the aim. But if we're not making money for Lowell, then it's not going to be much fun. So focus on per share metrics. That means every bit of the strategy along the way has to be focused at, we don't want to dilute the company out now and drill a resource too early before we demonstrate how big it gets, etc. So going in and saying, if you're not a shareholder to a fund, then you won't be treated equally like all shareholders when it comes to time to fund it. So please join us on the ride, and those kind of conversations. So I've learned a lot about that as well. So no wise old man, but some learnings along the way that I'm still trying to master.
Excellent, Mike. And look, just a thanks from the Lowell Resources Fund. We made a lot of money out of investing early. Thank you for the opportunity, to invest early in Southern Cross, and we've done very well out of Hannon as well. So thank you for you're one of the hardest working guys I know, and that sort of has paid off in spades. Rewarded by some fantastic success. So look, there's a few questions that have come in. One of them, just to sort of encapsulate it into one, and I think both Southern Cross and Hannon, in terms of community social license, the potential to be able to A, just do the exploration and get drilling, but B, the potential to actually take those discoveries through to mining. I know you're planning something very interesting at Sunday Creek in terms of putting in an exploration decline, and I'm a massive fan of doing that. You mentioned you love people, and that's probably part of the secret to gaining social license is to. Well, I'll turn it over to you. I don't want to sort of steal your thunder, but Mike, what are your sort of philosophies about social license?
Yeah, mission critical without a doubt, and everyone says it because everyone knows it, and that has to be that way. I've worked it with a lot of communities around the world. The interesting one now is with Southern Cross. I'm amongst my tribe, right? I'm where I grew up, and for most of my time, I've been the foreigner, and coming into a new environment. So very different dynamics in that way. But ultimately, you've got to give people the respect for what they deserve. That's what mandates society now. It's not the mining industry of a long time ago, even before my career. I think our careers have been built around this change, and so it's not such a surprise for somebody our age. But Europe set me up very well for Victoria, working in and around people. We're never ever going to keep everyone happy. That's without a doubt. But you need to have those robust discussions and keep people honest on fact. And when people understand the facts, they still mightn't like it, but at least they understand that you're telling them the truth and going forward. And we deal with mining is a controversial business in many respects, and that's why it's easier to do it away from people. But even when we're doing it away from people in the the back arc of Peru. We've got lots of people and villages around us, and we spent 5 years opening up that area because nobody's ever explored there before. So while we're doing early stage work, and the biggest thing is do what you say you're going to do, and do it again and again and again. We call it social license, which is not a nice term these days, because it's not a license. You don't sign anything. It's something you live and breathe, and every day it could come or it could go. And so I suppose, not the most definitive, but we've got the vast majority of people are the silent majority. You'll always find great supporters and people at the other ends who don't want the project. So it's getting the word out to the vast majority of people, and pretty much everywhere I've gone, that's what I've found. And most of the opposition, but not always, comes from outside the project. And so having even a vast majority of people locally support a project's never enough either. So you've got to work through all those levels of society, right through people, stakeholders, government, etc.
And Mike, I mean, we might have a little bit of time just to talk about critical minerals, and in that context, you said something very interesting to me once, in terms of Sunday Creek, that gold would pay for that project, but antimony would permit it, as in getting that license to actually develop it. Any comments about critical minerals or antimony in particular?
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, I suppose, in many respects in the critical metals business, because it's a tough business. We don't control it. China has spent decades and decades controlling both the mining and production, and I've seen that. They're restarting that graphite mine. We were competing as a small little company looking for 2,000 buyers of graphite. We were producing something like a sixth of Europe's graphite. 2,000 purchasing officers purchased graphite. Which one of them was going to take a huge risk on a slightly variable product because it came from one mine versus blended, consistent material they'd been buying for decades from the Chinese? So it was very hard to break into these markets, very hard to get the expertise. With antimony, it's been banned into the West from China, but they also banned the IP. So yes, we need these supply chains, but a great thing is, and we found the world's third largest heavy rare earth deposit I mentioned, we were just turned into a quarry, and we had lots of contracts with some of the biggest processors and end users, OEMs in Europe, but it was a very bad business for us because we took all the risk, because we didn't have the whole supply chain. The one big thing about antimony in our deposit here at Sunday Creek is it's 20% of the revenue mix. So gold, we don't need antimony to be at these prices for it to survive. So we've got a very long-term view about antimony, it's very strategic and makes it very important, but we don't need high prices of antimony to make this work. Gold is the major element that will make the talk on this high margin project, this extremely high grade project. So gold will back it for us as a business, but it will also back it for, our supporters. And if we can get more and more government support at various levels, through the US back to Australia, it's less risk. So it's got those unique characteristics. And also, gold isn't that sexy when it comes to, that controversy of mining. Why do you mine gold? It doesn't have that criticality. At least it does in some respects, medicine, etc. But antimony, rare earths, they're a much easy story to tell because genuinely they are much more critical. So it's wonderful to have that, and that's why the project ultimately gains the support.
Yeah, look, a very good mix of metals in Sunday Creek. Look, we are running short of time, but a couple of geological questions, if we can just wrap a couple together. One is, just how big can Southern Cross Gold be? I'm not sure if that is the company or the deposit. And then the other one is, are the huge gold grades in the entire area east of Fosterville and Costerfield, or is the gold in specific geological parts of it? So yeah, approach those how you see fit, Mike. You can wave your arms as much as you want.
Okay. Well, we're exploring 1/10 of a larger trend at Sunday Creek, and then we know Fosterville goes down to 2 kilometres, and we've only explored to about 1 kilometre. So, on those metrics, it can get a lot bigger. And we've already got a 2.2 to 3.2 million ounce exploration target between 8.5 and 10.6 grams per ton gold equivalent. So it's very rare, it's very unique, it's very high grade, and that's the uniqueness. But there's a lot of exploration upside, and we're not forgetting our exploration upside as we continually de-risk the project in the core area. Really, really important in Victoria that there's 2 gold events. This is the second question. One is what we call the Ordovician event, and the other is a late Devonian event. Ordovician is what the diggers in the 1850s found so impressive, but they're like the sultanas in a plum pudding. It's nuggety, so the old timers just love stamping it up, and they went home with a feed or not. But in a modern day sense, those projects are more difficult. You need to drill a lot. They have a high nugget effect, so the sultanas are like nuggets. Whereas the later event, which we call the late Devonian, which is about 70 million years geologically later, is what is Fosterville, what is Sunday Creek, what is Costerfield, and everything basically from Fosterville east. So it formed in a different place at a different time and gives very different economic outcomes. So it's more like the flour and the plum pudding. So, and then when you're in those structures, the antimony and gold are absolutely together, not grain by grain, but as a stope shape, definitely. Well, yeah, I think that's the simple answer given time frames.
Thanks, Mike. Last one, which is a pretty technical one, and I think this is about Sunday Creek. Was the induced polarization exercise successful? Any nice red plumes?
Yeah, IP always gives very nice red plumes, is the glib answer from a geologist. And we're working through all that. But we've no doubt got the core area that we've shown that lights up, and we've got lots of anomalies out bush, but we really want to make sure that we test some of those before we trump them up. This is not a exploration story in its own right to trump up, right? We want to find something and then tell the market about it, as opposed to promote the exploration in its own right, because we've got something very significant at Sunday Creek, and we think that 90% of that area will hold more of these Sunday Creeks without a doubt. But what they'll exactly look like before we start testing them, and we've got 1 rig going to 2 on the regional work. So yes, the geophysics always shows anomalies, but we're now just trying to understand them better.
Do geophysics, yeah, there's something to drill. Excellent. Look, I think that's pretty much all the questions. There was one question which is more focused on the fund and the Lowell side of things, just about this year's distribution. What I can say to that question is, yeah, we've had some very good performance over the last 12 months, but distribution really is driven off what we have realised within the fund, i.e., the sales that we've made. So we haven't sold all of our profitable positions, because we think there's more to come. So fingers crossed. All right, look, better start to wrap it up there. I want to thank you very, very much again, Mike, for taking the time to come and talk to us and be our July lodestar of the month. There's been a huge amount of interest, so thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. I think the poll has just popped up, and there's a reminder there about our mid-year investor briefing, where Mike will be speaking briefly at that. So if you get a chance and you are in Melbourne, please register to come along to that. I also need to make a note of our next webinar. That will be on the 1st of August, Friday. I think it's Friday the 1st of August at the same time, first Friday of the month. And our guest then will be Andy Beckwith, most recently of De Grey Mining, talking to us about the discovery of the huge Hemi gold deposit in the Pilbara in Western Australia. So please, if you are available, come and watch that. Once again, thank you very much to Mike as our guest. Fabulous insights there. Also, thank you to the organisers of the webinar, Boyd and Bridget. They do a fantastic job. And I think, yeah, look, Mike, really appreciate your preparation and your insights. And as ever, very frank, open and honest about yourself, and very, very humble for someone who's had some, really fabulous success. And, we hope at the fund to be able to continue to back your, really exciting opportunities. And I'm sure there'll be more in the future.
No, John, you present a very unique mix in the world of starting these companies, especially. and play a key role in these discoveries as a consequence. So thank you, and thanks to the fund, and thanks for those who took the time to listen.
Great. Okay, we will wrap it up there, and hopefully see everybody again next month, and as many people as possible at the Melbourne event. Cheers.